Hi, I'm Louise and I'll talk to you today about the Junior Energy Manager Endpoint Assessment. There's three elements to this endpoint assessment: the knowledge test, the practical assessment, also known as the energy audit, and the assessment interview or professional discussion. So the first element of the endpoint assessment is normally the knowledge test. This is an online test and is normally completed within 90 minutes maximum. There's 60 questions and the knowledge test accounts for 20% of the overall endpoint assessment grade. The test is completed online using platforms such as Teams or Zoom and is invigilated by one of our trained invigilation team. You will need to screen share throughout and be in a room on your own and follow strict examination conditions. You'll need to have your camera on for the entirety of the test and you may be asked by the invigilator to show you around your room. You must not have any books, notes or other resources with you. So part two of the endpoint assessment is normally the energy audit. You'll have already got ready for this as part of Gateway and you'll have submitted a short report of around 500 words to let your assessor know what your plans are and outlines for the energy audit. So the energy audit itself will last around 3 hours and you'll be given at least 1 week's notice of the observation time and date. The observation will normally be undertaken on a one-to-one basis, so your independent endpoint assessor will normally only assess one apprentice at a time. Throughout the observation, you're expected to comply with and work in accordance with the standard procedures of your employer and, of course, health and safety. After the energy audit, within 10 working days, you'll need to submit a short report to tell us about the audit. And you should consider the key skills and behaviours outlined in the standard when producing this for us. When putting together any reports, please avoid the use of AI. And if you do use this, perhaps for spell check or for making your work look a bit more smooth, please reference it whenever it's been used. And this report will be uploaded by your training provider to our portal. The final part of the endpoint assessment is normally the interview, which could also be called a professional discussion. This is underpinned by the portfolio of evidence and accounts for around 20% of your endpoint assessment. So the professional discussion is used to assess the junior energy manager on skills not covered by the practical assessment, performance in the practical and the knowledge test, and behaviours using the portfolio of evidence as a basis for the discussion. So the portfolio itself is not marked, but it is used by the assessor to read through to get to know you better and to personalise questions based on the portfolio. The professional discussion will last around about an hour and the independent endpoint assessor can add 10% onto the time if needed to close off last questions. So here's some of the key skills and behaviours that are covered across the standard, and these might come up in part of the professional discussion. The professional discussion is particularly centred around the behaviours, and these are listed here and are available online. Here's the skills that are listed as well, and most of these will be covered in the energy audit, but can also be covered in the professional discussion. The interview can also cover some of the technical knowledge areas, particularly those that were not met in the knowledge test. Here's some of the other technical areas. Okay, so in terms of grading for this endpoint assessment, there's distinction, pass or fail. All assessments must be passed in order to achieve a pass grade, so all three areas must be met. The knowledge test accounts for 20% of the endpoint assessment, the energy audit is 60%, and the interview is 20%. To achieve a distinction grade, you must achieve a distinction in at least 2 of those assessments. So you'll need to be in a room on your own to complete the online assessment parts of the endpoint assessment. The EPA is completed in exam conditions and can be completed from work, home, or from your college or training provider. Of course, in terms of the energy audit, you'll have a planning meeting with your assessor to make sure that's all planned out and organised. In terms of online, please log in at least 15 minutes early and check your connection, and always check the requirements of the assessment plan, and any changes must be adhered to. Please allow around 2 hours for the knowledge test and around 1.5 hours maximum for the interview. You will need to bring photographic ID on the day of the endpoint assessment, such as a driver's licence or passport, and show that to your independent endpoint assessor before they record. All elements of the endpoint assessment are recorded for quality and training purposes, except for observations, in which case the endpoint assessor will make notes instead. Good luck with your endpoint assessment, and here's our email address should you need us.